Today around noon, Davis talks about how her studies in the Case Cleveland Playhouse MFA program served her well in New York. Plus, Tom Bell spent years ignoring any child in his presence. Now at age 50, the once confirmed bachelor realizes he's in over his head as the father to a pair of toddlers and an infant. He tells his story in the new memoir, My Dad is a Freak. And author Meg Cabot brings us another chapter in her series of books about Heather Wells, the former pop star who always seems to be surrounded by mayhem and mystery. Around Noon begins with news from NPR on 90.3. You're listening to Around Noon on 90.3. I'm Dee Perry, and this is the show for Tuesday, the 10th of July. Being the father of small children can be stressful for any dad. Now add in the fact that before he got married, Tom Bell was a 45-year-old confirmed bachelor who never thought kids would be part of his life. So it's easy to see why a few years later, with 2 toddlers and a baby, the nearly 50-year-old Tom is an overwhelmed, sometimes bewildered, but proud father. Bell, who was a general contractor and later the owner of the popular Tremont bar, the Flying Monkey, has turned to being a full-time writer when he's not changing diapers, dishing out Cheerios, and trying to figure out what this being a dad business is all about. Tom's chronicled what he's learned so far in his new memoir, My Dad is a Freak, published by AFF and Sons. And Tom joins us today around noon. Thank you for being here, and glad you could get away.
It's great to be here, Dee. I escaped this morning.
Well, before you got married, did you ever think you wanted to be a dad, or were you more of the W.C. Fields type, get away from me, kid, you bother me?
Yeah. I was, I never really thought about having kids. I was kind of oblivious to kids. I was a horrible uncle. I have dozens of nieces and nephews, some of which I know their names, some of which I could recognize on the street if they passed me. But I was just not that into kids, even though all my sisters have quite a few of them. In fact, before we had kids, this is a true story. I was in my doctor's office, and my longtime nurse was rummaging through her purse. She wanted to show me pictures of her new grandkids. And I said, listen, don't worry about it. Don't go through the trouble. I've seen pictures of kids. They all look the same to me. Well, the room got real quiet, and she kind of shuffled out of there. And when I relayed this to my wife later, she was mortified. And, I'm sorry, Dee, I didn't get the memo. I didn't know that you're not supposed to ever turn down offers of looking at people's grandkids. Right. We now have a different doctor and a different nurse.
You were droned out of the office.
Yes, by my own inanity.
What kind of relationship did you have with your own dad? Was he a child-centric kind of father, or was he more along the lines of what you were?
No, my dad was, I guess I would describe him as an off-the-rack 1950s variety dad. We had mom, dad, and the kids in the suburbs. Dad was a 9-to-5er.
And then just wait till your father gets home and you'll get punished.
Just wait till your father gets home, absolutely, which is... still rings true in my ears. But that's, so there wasn't such thing as quality time back then. Dad did what he had to do. My mother was a teacher, so she worked. And then you had the remains of the day, so to speak, between 7 p.m. and bedtime, which is an hour later. And every once in a while, family vacation. And that was pretty much it.
So we come to this point in your life where you meet the woman you're going to marry, and the first chapter of your book is titled The Last First Date. You met your wife, Susie, in the bar that you owned. How long before you realized that she was the one?
It was that night. It was
really?
Yes, it was. It was love at first sight. It was. I had built this bar in 2000. I was 40-some years old. I'd been a lifelong bachelor, and I thought, instead of me chasing women and chasing beers, why not build a bar, and they'll have to come back to me. They'll have to come into my house for the second half of my bachelorhood.
Man.
So, but as they say, the best laid plans. We opened the doors in November of 2000, and 6 months later, she walks into the bar, and she stole my heart. She was my soulmate. I called my sister on my way home from the bar that night saying, I just met the woman I'm going to marry. And we got married 8 months later, and all of a sudden I had no use for a bar. All of a sudden, there was just excess inventory in my life, just another pain in the butt to maintain, so I sold it.
You didn't need to meet any more women.
That was it. Mission accomplished.
Now, when you discovered your wife was going to have a baby, what was your first reaction? I mean, when you didn't even tell her, what did you feel immediately?
Well, I immediately went to the calculator. The one thing that my brain just got stuck on is that, I'm going to be responsible for feeding this child 3 meals a day for how many years of my life? So I figured until the age of 10, I would be responsible for preparing 10,950 meals. And I couldn't get that out of my mind. It just drove me crazy. I walked around the block. I just couldn't get it out. I'm like, honey, do you realize what we're signing up for? That's 3 meals every day for 10 years. I can't even feed myself.
And what did you think was going to happen after 10 years? The kid gets a job, gets out.
I convinced myself that they'd be old enough to go to the pantry and just shove some Cheetos in their mouths and take care of themselves. I was convinced that something I'd be relieved of some kind of duty in a decade.
That's funny. I am talking with Tom Bell, who is the author of My Dad is a Freak, which was just recently published. Tom will be signing copies of that book Thursday at Joseph Beth Booksellers at the Cleveland Clinic from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And he'll also be at the Cleveland Auction Ceremony, that is the Cleveland Auction Company, on Professor Avenue signing books. And that'll be Sunday from noon to 4 as part of A Taste of Tremont. You can find out more online at aroundnoon.ideastream.org. So, Tom, how quickly did you realize that all the skills you'd acquired previously in life weren't going to be much help when it came to being a dad?
The day we found out that we were pregnant, that we were going to have a baby, I realized I was just woefully unprepared. I didn't forecast anything in my mind. I didn't really work through all the details of what would be required of me as a father. And to this day, I still have lapses of reality, and I think that I'm single for a few hours.
How do you do that?
Well, for instance, a concert was coming to town, so I just went online. I bought some concert tickets for my wife and I, and then I tell her when I see her at the end of the day, and she freaks out. We have 3 kids. How are we going to a concert? And the whole thing that goes with a concert, going before and doing the tailgating, and then you're in rough shape the next day. That all takes major amount of planning, which just flies out of my mind. It's just not there.
So you didn't make it to the concert?
We made it. This will probably be the last one for quite a few years.
Okay. Because you had to mobilize a small army to make that possible.
Absolutely.
Were you worried at all that a man in his mid-40s who was used to doing what he wanted to do on his own terms, that you wouldn't be able to make the kind of effort that it takes to refocus your attention and your energy?
Yeah, I was. What happened in my life is I had the bar and I had a renovation construction business at the same time. And when the market fell apart, the housing market in 2008, my wife said to me, she said, you've been wanting to sit down and write and become a full-time professional writer. Now's the time. Just get out of the market. Don't worry about anything else. Just do it. And that freed up a lot of my time, and I was able to focus on spending the good quality times with my kids. But the 9-to-5ers and the dual working parents, it's really hard. It's really hard to you feel like you're stealing something away and you're missing out on the small details. And that is life, For every action there's an opposite reaction, and for every give there's a take. I've been fortunate that I've been able to free up my schedule to really focus on those small things, the small details about being a dad.
Yeah, and it sounds, and from the look on your face, it looks like it's a role that you've come to relish, even though you're still not secure in what to do about it on any given day. But it sounds like you like having that time.
I do. I really like having the time. And I think that as I've gotten older now, you kind of realize that life is made up of big moments like weddings and ceremonies, graduations, promotions at work. And life's made up of little small moments, like when my 6-year-old first discovered an ant, crawling on the driveway, and he realizes, well, there's another life form, something that doesn't take batteries, something besides me. And then the first time my 2-year-old looks up at the sky and sees the moon, this big, huge, bright planet at night, and she realizes that it's not something she could touch and not something that she'll ever touch. It's just some big thing out there. Well, if you put it on a scale, you put all the big moments in life on one side and the small ones on the other. The small ones, both in terms of quality and quantity, are going to far outweigh the big ones. Yet they're the ones that most easily slip through the cracks that we don't really catch in life unless we were able to shut down our mind, live in the now, and just focus on their little lives and what's important to them and all their discoveries.
Yeah. Speaking of little lives, when your first child was born, you write that you were surprised at the blasé kind of attitude that you saw much of the hospital staff exhibiting, but you came to realize as you watched 2 doctors and a nurse doing preliminary checkups and giving first baths that mechanized repetition and lack of emotion meant something else. What did it mean? What did you find out?
Well, at first you want the world to stop because you've had a baby, you've put a new child into the world, and it's such a monumental change and a major thing in your life, and you contrast that with the mechanized routines of all the doctors and the nurses in the maternity ward, and you're telling yourself in the back of the head, yeah, they see this all the time. There's a ton of babies on this floor, and they're all screaming and wailing. But as it starts to sink in, and you watch your child going through all these routinized medical examinations, you start to realize that this is exactly what you want. You don't want the doctor to pull you over to the side. You don't want the nurse to come up to you. You want your kid just to be on this baby assembly line, going through the maternity ward, getting checked underneath the hood, getting the oil checked, and then they move on to the next one. So it's those are the stark contrasts that I explore throughout the book. That's kind of a reoccurring theme, just between the seemingly parallel yet distinct realities of raising kids.
And the title, is this something your children have said to you at this point? My dad is a freak, or to other people about you?
Well, yeah, and they caught that, part of it from my wife and part of it from my sisters who have known me for a while. I tend to kind of overreact and freak out about things. One example is when my wife was first pregnant, we did everything by the book. The doctor said, you guys should go to birthing classes and know what to expect, know what you're in for. So I did that. I followed the rules. I went to the birthing class. At one point, to separate the men from the women. The men have to wear this latex baby pouch on the front that's filled with 80 pounds of concrete and walk around the room and see what it's like for 10 minutes to be pregnant. Did all that. But what they don't tell you, and what no one has ever told me my whole life, is that when Tommy was delivered, and it was a natural childbirth, his head was shaped like a cone. He had like a cone head on it. And it was horrifying to me. But I couldn't express my concerns to anyone. Nobody wanted to hear it. My wife was in labor for 12 hours. The doctor's in and out. They have 15 patients at the same time. The nurses are hustling and bustling. I'm trying to stop somebody and say, my kid has a head shaped like a traffic pylon. He can't be a wizard every Halloween for the rest of his life because that's the only hat that fits. So I was ignored. I was just put in a corner, and I spent the next week Google searching, conehead, pinhead, pylons. I had to get the answer to why his head was shaped like this. As it turns out, it springs back into shape, but just the trauma of going through the birth canal. These are the details that either people don't tell me in life, or I'm just not paying attention that well.
Well, I'm glad you worked it out, and I'm thinking you may have more books down the line, so I'll be curious, especially when they get to the teenage phase.
Yeah, I have an endless source of inspiration. I think by the teenage phase, I may be putting them up for adoption. I don't know, but I've got at least one or two.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa. Yeah.
Thomas,
Very well done.
great fun. Thank you so much for sharing the book with us.
It's been great, Dee. Thank you very much.
Tom Bell is the author of My Dad is a Freak, and he'll be signing copies of his book Thursday at Joseph Beth Booksellers at the Cleveland Clinic. That'll be from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and he will also be at the Cleveland Auction Company on Professor Avenue, signing books Sunday from noon to 4 p.m. as part of a Taste of Tremont. Find out more online at aroundnoon.ideastream.org. Our thanks today to Lawrence Caswell, Mark Rosenberger, Dan Paletta, and Dave Diorio. I'm Dee Perry. Have a good afternoon as you stay tuned to 90.3.